Lautrec the Loathed. Hated by the novice. Hated by the community. Hated by the hordes of chosen undead. A Wikipedia is intended to be neutral, yet the Dark Souls wiki describes Lautrec as, quote, a psychopath who doesn't care about other people and readily kills them after they have served their purposes. So universal is the distaste for this man that it reaches the unbiased consensus of an encyclopedia. But what about our own real-world history? All successful rebels are loved by the public for freeing them from their abusers. Meanwhile, all unsuccessful rebels are killed by the powers that be, and coincidentally, the public go on hating them for a time at least. What if we were to take Lautrec's effigy off the bonfire and examine his history with an unemotional eye?
Why, you do not run away. Hear me out.
Let's start straight away by talking about a large theme of Dark Souls. This theme is drawn from a conclusion many adults draw about the world around them, that the powers that be aren't benevolent at all, but are doing everything they can to manipulate and profit off the backs of the powerless. What do we find in Miyazaki's Dark Souls? Our very quest is fraudulent, as we revealed in our first video on the timeline. We showed that the language used to retell the undead legend is falsely archaic and not real. The legend is built to inspire the undead to carry out the god's wishes. The church is lying to us and manipulates and also even gets rid of one of its own. Gwyndolin uses illusions to misguide us, using the image of Guinevere to spread this same narrative of the undead curse, which is a lie. And there are many co-conspirators. We know many different factions that all have their own agendas. The demons want to stop the undead champion. But there are no champions, just undead fools, patsies being tricked by the machinations of Gwyndolin. The demons put their warriors along the path of this quest to defend their queen, land, and culture. They know that the powers that be want to direct these undeads to destroy the witch for their own gain, without any risk on their part. Frampt guides us, Karth guides us, but we are just used to their ends. So extreme is our unawareness that we don't even realise we are going to die at the end of the game. It comes as a complete surprise, so even the ending is sort of a smack in the face. We weren't expecting it to end at all necessarily. We were expecting an ending, but not for our character to die. Indeed, linking the flame didn't sound like it was something that would destroy us. Gwyn is still alive, but we don't think it through when we see he is damaged. We just kill him, just like we kill every other boss, and we continue playing the game passively and mindlessly. So what happens as we learn about the game, or as people teach us about the lore, is that a lot of characters who were desirable or seemingly kind are manipulated, or in fact, don't exist. Guinevere is an illusion who is tapping into these questionable sort of feelings, or perhaps some innocent feelings of motherhood, and we want to be on her side. With time, however, we realise it is totally false. With time, we realise that a lot of characters we believe to be villains, for example Seath, aren't total villains after all. Seath, although he was very twisted and uncompromising, what he did may not have been anything other than trying to revive his own dragon kind. The gap between good and bad in Dark Souls is very confused, just as it is in the real world. Demons, as we have talked about, have their culture. They protect their own. They keep to themselves. They are not evil, they just look unappealing. The opposite of Guinevere. In fact, demons would not trouble us if we hadn't troubled them. So with today's episode, I want to hone in on some characters initially, and then focus on one particular character. Let's look with a broad stroke at a mix of characters first. Let's take Petrus as our first focus. With time, we realise that Petrus isn't just a bumbling man.
Hello there. I believe we are not acquainted. I am Petrus of Thoroland.
Somewhat kindly, somewhat standoffish.
I prefer to keep a distance, if possible.
And so on and so forth. These are just our first impressions. With time, we find out that he is fairly immoral, nasty, and cowardly.
Well, a pity that is, for it will amount to nothing, for the little madam is not worth her salt without her family name.
The silly, priestly man is revealed to be otherwise. Logan seems as lucid as anything.
I'm afraid that you are unable to learn sorcery. The basic framework, you see, it cannot be taught.
Then goes mad.
Oh, there you are. It's been a while. Or were you just here? This fascinating place defeats my sense of time.
Frampt manipulates us.
I wish to elucidate your fate, and the very reason your kind have appeared. Chosen undead, your fate is to succeed the great Lord Gwyn, so that you may link the fire, cast away the dark, and undo the curse of the undead.
Many characters are not what they seem. So, let's talk about a character who we all get goosebumps from in one way or another. Lautrec the Embraced. If one played Demon Souls before, a bit like Patches has a recurring character, Lautrec reminds us of someone whose predecessor betrayed us in Demon Souls. We meet Lautrec in Dark Souls, and he's in a locked room. He's in a place that seems to be run by the Channeler. At least the Channeler has the strongest influence there. It is certainly the most powerful being in the space. I wonder if he had already been locked up sometime before this moving in of the Channeler. But either way, he's locked up. We don't know who locked him up, but he's locked up. Now, as we try to rescue him, his way of speaking is remarkably unsettling. We don't get the best feeling from him at first.
Oh, still human, are you? Then I am in luck. Could you help me?
In fact, in quite the opposite way to the feeling we get from Guinevere. He is sitting in a possibly arrogant manner, even though he's locked up. He seems quite full of himself, and he seems almost to be mocking us.
Please, I have duties to fulfill, and I will reward you handsomely.
As if we are unintelligent or simple-minded.
Well, I am certain you stand to benefit.
He's not really pleading or needing in his request, almost joking about how we should help him. It seems suspicious somehow, because this is not how someone would normally behave. Of course, our opinion of ourselves is extremely high. We are, after all, the chosen undead. We are special. Maybe to someone who understands the Dark Souls world as an onlooker, the sight of a new player having such a belief may be an amusing one. How special these chosen undead think they are. But as a naive beginner, we feel we are the chosen undead. We feel very special, and we get a feeling of why would he treat us this way, so disrespectfully. That's really not on. Of course, the Bell of Awakening gets rung a lot, and there are a lot of undead. Maybe Lautrec is right not to panic. He is locked up, but maybe he knows how things work. This greater experience of Lautrec, that he knows how things work, and we, at least as Dark Souls beginners, don't, will be something we are going to explore more in this video. It might simply be knowledge that is leading him to behave the way he does. We stumble on him and think we are this important character, but we are just an undead, and he knows another will pass his cage. This general lack of concern or courtesy is the first impression he makes on us, And perhaps we can escape from this misleading first impression by examining his words and actions in the light of reason, just like we escape the first impression of Guinevere's appearance and voice.
O chosen undead, I am Guinevere, daughter of Lord Gwyn and Queen of Sunlight.
Let's see if we can escape from the voice of Lautrec, which makes us feel that he is evil.
Thank you. Yes, sincerely.
Let's first explore what happened in the branching decision tree of the Lautrec questline. If we kill Lautrec within the cell, we cannot get his items in the cage. If we could retrieve them, his items would consist of 2 shotels he dual wields, then a parrying dagger, and the favoured set. It's a big thing that he is connected with the goddess Fina, and its connotation is important. We don't know much about the goddess Fina, but a useful comparison can be made with Game of Thrones, so skip this section if you want to avoid spoilers. We will say that perhaps it's a bit like the relationship between Daenerys and another character, Daario Naharis. Daario Naharis is originally instructed to assassinate Daenerys, but changes to her side, becoming a bodyguard and eventual general. They later become lovers, rather like Lautrec and Fina. Daario Naharis also wields a shotel and a parrying dagger. He also has women carved on the hilts of his swords, the same way there is a female representation on Lautrec's armour. And, interestingly, in Game of Thrones, Daenerys is concerned with freeing slaves. We'll get to why that may be a link in a moment. Let's look at it through this lens to see whether Lautrec is, after all, not such a bad guy. Just for a moment. Let's first put his voice out of the equation for a second, ignore how he sounds, and with our knowledge of the world of Dark Souls, let's see if we can understand his behaviour. First of all, Fina is called fickle. What does fickle mean? Fickle means changing your loyalty. Now, Lautrec is embraced, yes, and it is therefore implied that she is romantically fickle. But this is not logical. Either way, let's move from the romantic side for a moment. Fina is likely to be called fickle from her kind. Lautrec wouldn't be calling her fickle because he is still wearing her ring, and he still seems to be in love with her. Now, we have mentioned that we believe Fina may have been in relations with Xanthus King Jeremiah, the legendary exile. Maybe he was exiled from the demons for this relationship with Fina. Or maybe he was exiled by the gods because he was already in a relationship with Fina and is seeking the same things as her. He also uses chaos magic when he invades us, and his crown is tradable with Snuggly, who is a lore representation of what is connected with what in the game. On trading the Xanthus crown, you receive a ring of favour and protection. Also, King Jeremiah invading you in the Painted World is a rather peculiar place to invade. The Xanthus King seems to have connections with Fina, and with the demons. Therefore, perhaps, as the demons are counter to the wishes of the gods, Fina being fickle is perhaps instead the change of loyalty to the demons. Perhaps she was a sort of Helen of Troy character in Dark Souls. Interestingly, the fact that Lautrec is holding the Ring of Favour and Protection implies that he is still loyal to Fina, or at least that he's not so upset with her as to have removed it, since if he had removed it once, it would be broken. So again, this leads to the conclusion that Fina's fickleness may be in that she herself has rebelled against the gods and aligned with the Xanthus King, or perhaps some other anti-god behaviour or sect. But what could this dissent be? What might Lautrec be doing that is against the gods? He does say he has a duty to fulfill.
Please, I have duties to fulfill.
He tells us he has a task. Initially, we have Lautrec practically mocking us and seemingly very unconcerned whether we open the cage or not. What if it's because he knows the sheer number of chosen undead? He knows they are simply going to keep coming like a train. If you knew the sheer number of chosen undead, and you were locked in a cage before the first bell of awakening, you might not beg and plead and cry for help. Why lose your dignity? Someone is going to come along. Also, Lautrec may be intelligent enough to know that begging and pleading probably doesn't work. It may be the case that he knows he has to play it quite cool. Maybe we as the chosen undead are not that special. And if he knows that, perhaps it means he knows much more. If he knows undead are going to keep coming, it means he presumably knows that the undead legend is a lie. If there is not one chosen undead, there's just a ton of undead. We know that lore ourselves now. The story is a lie. So we can assume that Lautrec knows the fraudulence of the undead legend, and therefore very possibly that Guinevere is an illusion, that the undead are shepherded to their own death, and so on. So what is his next action if we release him? He goes back to the Firelink Shrine. At some point, he does the most important action of perhaps any NPC in the game. He kills Anastasia, the Firelink Shrine firekeeper. Now, we like the firekeeper. Of course, she seems like a kind girl. When she gets her tongue back, she seems very nice.
Now I can continue my duty as a keeper. But I only hope that my impure tongue does not offend.
But what we can say for sure is that she is incredibly brainwashed. She believes she can return to humanity and die if the flame is linked.
Framt has told me of you, that you have agreed to link the fire. I thank you sincerely. Finally, the curse of the undead will be lifted, and I can die human.
There is no proof for this. The little dialogue she has shows that she thinks she is doing what she can and helping her church effectively. We, however, know the church is dishonest. We know the curse is a lie, and we know the church as a manipulator. We have proven that the church manufactures undead for their own purposes, taking out their humanity. So this poor girl is brainwashed. Not only is she brainwashed, her tongue is cut out and her legs maimed, so she can't walk. And she is caged. This is typical abuse of power to ensure that no matter what, no matter the suffering, that lesser groups are led to do their bidding. They need that Firelink bonfire to maintain. It is essential. Do we think it's a coincidence that what Lautrec does stops the whole game from being achievable for a novice? Is it coincidence that it makes it absolutely impossible for a novice to progress in the game effectively? Do we think he really needs humanity from a firekeeper soul so badly? He doesn't get any other firekeeper souls for Estus reinforcement either. So if we look at it in another light, it may not be personal to the firekeeper. Lautrec may be attempting to destroy a key bonfire used in the herding and slaughter and slavery of the foolish undead. The bonfire the undead are sent to, the key bonfire that is used to herd these undead, begin their journey and provide a key central resting point for their travels. No wonder the crestfallen warrior is not bothering to act. He slightly wised up. Lautrec, however, is fully wised up because he's in a relationship with a goddess who left the gods, who has perhaps become so disgusted with the gods' behaviour, with their abuse and manipulation of humans, that she has vowed to try and free them. After all, the gods shepherd undead, who often willingly become undead, or were forced to against their will, to literally burn themselves as sacrifices to keep the gods in a life of comfort. So Lautrec kills the firekeeper because then the Firelink Shrine is out of action. It is an absolutely essential bonfire for any decent chance to get into the catacombs, any decent chance to get to the undead burg. The only decent place of rest for many bounce-off points. Destroying the bonfire, or making it not function, is a fantastic solution if you are trying to block the god's plan of rekindling the flame. Of course, it is sad that Lautrec killed the firekeeper, but let's again remind ourselves that she is totally brainwashed. She is maimed and has her tongue cut out. She has no desire to escape, and her soul is gnawed by infinite humanity. She is effectively living a life of pure suffering. She is so brainwashed that she thinks it's for the greater good. Even if the flame is linked, the best case scenario is that she becomes human and dies. This is basically a terrible case of not realizing that the people who claim to protect her are actually her captors and abusers. What happens when we attack Lautrec? He resists and does not want to fight. He says, "You force me to do this."
Well, what have we here? Are you sure about this? You leave me no choice.
He's not that interested in killing us. If he was so evil, wouldn't he kill us for some humanity? One point that doesn't seem to help his favour is that he tells us there is an abandoned cleric.
Maiden Thurland and her followers recently arrived in this land, but she became stranded deep below the catacombs.
He is talking about Rhea. This seems rather unkind. After all, if we rescue Rhea, she is a good person, it seems. However, how well does Lautrec know Rhea? Let's just put it into context. All he knows is that she is a member of the Way of White, a corrupt, nasty religion. He also didn't abandon or trap her himself. He only saw Petrus come back up from the catacombs.
I heard it from a fleeing old man. That poor bastard. All his robes and trinkets won't help him now.
And to go and rescue her is a very dangerous activity. He has his own business to do, after all. He doesn't know this group of people personally. He simply knows that they are a part of the religious church. We happen to know that Rhea is disliked by the church due to her lack of family name, but Lautrec doesn't. She is perhaps deliberately killed at the end of her questline, but at the very least she is abandoned by Petrus. But if we didn't know any of that, and you just knew they were church members, which is likely all that Lautrec knows, then it's likely that you assume, if you understand how the Dark Souls world works, that they are the perpetrators of humanity theft and guilty of using humans as fuel. Guilty of tricking and manipulating them with faith to shuttle them to the flame as human sacrifice. These are not good people, and you can see that Lautrec hints at this when he says she will be replete with humanity.
A Nubar cleric would be replete with humanity.
Why would she be filled with humanity? It means he thinks she isn't a good person.
Most fools have more humanity than they know what to do with. Now, who do you imagine will make the best use of it?
As the Dark Hand's description gloats, it is capable of sapping even the humanity of a replete saint. Why are these religious individuals so full of humanity? Because they harvest it from innocence. Because they are the ones creating the undead, as we talked about in the Way of White video. Even in the original intro to the game, it shows the Way of White ritually making an undead. So it is an unsettling recommendation, but from Lautrec's standpoint, who does not know Rhea, the clerics and the higher-ups of the Way of White are all guilty, and perhaps deserve such a fate as we see. And then, finally, what happens in the story of Lautrec? We see him in the rooms in front of Guinevere. Now, if you were pro the gods, it's a bit of a bizarre thing to be in that room. This seems to be anti-god behaviour. rather that he and his two friends are stopping those who seek to do Guinevere's bidding from succeeding. How do we invade him? By listening to the Black Eye Orb. The Black Eye Orb keeps constant watch on the city of the gods, Anor Londo. Therefore, it is a tool of the gods, and therefore it is in the gods' interest to keep the firekeeper at the Firelink Shrine alive, because she aids the gods by her maintaining of an essential flame for the undead sheep. Lautrec is also undead himself, and that he is embraced by Fina would mean he has gone far and experienced much as an undead. He may understand being undead more than us. If we attack Lautrec, once invading his world, he says,
I thought you were wiser, but I thought wrong. 'Tis a terrible pity, like a moth flittering towards a flame.
This is very interesting dialogue, considering we do burn ourselves in the flame for the gods eventually. An interesting analogy, and wisdom.
I thought you were wiser.
Why would wisdom be invoked? If we attack him at the Firelink Shrine, he says simply,
You leave me no choice. I was once grateful to you, but if this is our fate, so be it.
So it is only after we attempt to undo his work at the Firelink Shrine that he compares us as a moth to a flame. And then, if we continue fighting him, he says,
Oh look, another one. How many times will these lambs rush to slaughter?
This is also very interesting dialogue. Lambs, plural. There are many of us. So there's many of these undead trying to renew the bonfire, trying to do Guinevere's bidding, blindly going to sacrifice themselves in the flame. Moths towards flames, lambs to slaughter, and all plural. This sounds much more like he is describing fools following the phony undead curse than describing the actual reality of simply fighting. Fools who quite literally fight to fix a bonfire that will aid them in a quest that ends in their downfall as a sacrifice. And so, Lautrec is perhaps a hero for the undead. We are just so brainwashed and deluded that we fight our rescuer. This is not to say that he is not slightly unnerving as a character, but perhaps this energy comes from resentment. Resentment of the stupidity of the herds of undead he is trying to save, who struggle to maintain the structure of their organized downfall. Slaves willfully aiding their manipulators, the gods, to continue their abusive reign through their own ignorance. Lautrec isn't a farce of pure evil. Perhaps he is like Daario Naharis in Game of Thrones, doing the bidding of his mistress to free slaves. And, like in this other work of art, the very culture resists, with the slaves addicted to their own slavery. Lautrec, an evil villain who delights in his wrongdoing, or a misunderstood hero, struggling to liberate the enslaved and who is hated for it. He gives us goosebumps, but perhaps we've all misjudged him after all.